You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Ethan Hristodoulou.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Hristodoulou, and today, continuing on with the 8-part mini-series we are doing here on the show, I am introducing you all to the coaching staffs of each and every single team in the USFL, and today we are focusing on none other than the newly rebranded black and gold Pittsburgh Maulers. So, my Maulers fans, comment down below, how are you feeling going into this next season with a brand new coaching staff? Some holdovers from last year, but for the most part, we have a handful of guys coming in here to change things up and really shake up from what we saw last season, which was a pretty tough year to watch, I would say, from the Pittsburgh Maulers. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Firstly, introducing you all to the entire coaching staff, and then I will give a nice little breakdown of the head coach and the two leading coordinators of the team. Head coach Ray Horton, a very tenured NFL veteran on both the playing side and the coaching side. We'll go into a deep dive on him in just a moment. Your assistant head coach and defensive coordinator is none other than his son, Jarren Horton, who was on the team last year. Offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach is John Tomlinson. The defensive backs coach is Steve Meyer. We're then looking at Mark Hall as the special teams and linebackers coach. We have Rick Courtwright as the run game coordinator and defensive lines coach. We then have Bill, and I believe that is pronounced Kayat, tight ends and running backs coach. We have Emerson Martin as the offensive line coach, and then Alex Wood as the wide receivers coach, and the general manager of the team is none other than Lonnie Young. So that is the entire coaching staff for this year's Maulers team. Let's dive in a little bit and get to know the head coach, Ray Horton, and our two coordinators for the team. So starting off with head coach Ray Horton here, a 3-time very decorated Super Bowl champion, winning Super Bowl 27 as a player with the Dallas Cowboys, and then winning Super Bowl 40 and 43 as a coach on the Pittsburgh Steelers. His NFL coaching career dates all the way back to 1994. He has been in the coaching business for quite some time now. He won those 2 Super Bowls as a secondary coach with the Pittsburgh Steelers in that infamous 3-4 defense, with stints as defensive coordinator from 2011 to 2016 with the Cardinals, Browns, Titans, and then Browns again in that order. This will be his very first head coaching stint, and as a defensive-minded coach, I expect that the Maulers are going to have a very tight and well-run defensive unit. That was one thing that already looked pretty solid, I would say, last year with the Maulers, but now bringing in a guy like Ray Horton, who comes from such a successful group as the Pittsburgh Steelers as a defensive coach, I think that we're really going to see this unit shine going into season 2, especially having his son underneath him as defensive coordinator and head coaching assistant. Being able to have that type of synergy and rapport with someone, it goes beyond just like a friendly, coaching staff kind of friendship type deal, or, where people that have just worked together for a long time. No, this is father and son working together to make something happen, and I'm really excited to see that whole dynamic play out on this coaching staff here. I'm very curious to see whether they opt to go for like a 3-4 style defense, which is something that Ray Horton should be fairly familiar with, having spent so much time on Pittsburgh and winning a couple of Super Bowls in that same defense. Or do we maybe see some of the 4-3 that his son is more familiar with from his early coaching days? But we'll dive into that in a second. But overall, I will say that I do think this is a fantastic hire for Ray Horton. He was somebody that at one point was this close to winning himself a head coaching job with the Arizona Cardinals. Ultimately, it fell through. Bruce Arians got the job there, but this is somebody who, while he hasn't had an actual head coaching job yet, he has been on the precipice, and he's been on some pretty impressive groups. I know that things were a little bit rocky during that time frame from like 2011 to 16. The Cardinals were, he was there for a year as a coordinator. He was there for a couple of years with the Tennessee Titans. Not bad with the defenses there. And then he was unfortunately on that Browns team back in, I believe it was 2016, where things just did not look really good under head coach Hugh Jackson. So I won't really credit him for some of the dysfunction going on over there, because at the end of the day, the Browns do be the Browns. And as long as I have been watching the NFL for my, near I would say 15, 16, 17 years, however long it's been now since I started to, actually almost 20 years, because I believe I started watching around like 2003, 2004. So getting close to 20 years of football, the Browns have been the Browns. I won't throw too much of the blame of that on him, but I'm really excited to see how the defensive side of the ball here looks. And I'm excited to see just what he allows John Tomlinson, his offensive coordinator, do on the offensive side of the ball. As a defensive guy, I expect Ray Horton to be very hands-on with that unit there, and I'm really hoping that we get to see John Tomlinson really come into his own as the offensive coordinator this year. He's returning from the 2022 staff, and this is somebody who's been around in the coaching game since 1994 when he started at Cardinal Gibbons High School. That's all the way back in 1994. The guy has been around the block now for nearly 30 years of coaching. He's coached at all 4 levels: high school, college, NFL. He's been everywhere, semi-pro. He has done it all in terms of coaching. And he's a guy that has had a pretty decent split between being quarterbacks coaching or whether it's running backs coaching. He's done a lot with the two primary forces of scoring with the offense here. So I'm really hoping that with a guy like John Tomlinson here, coming back for year number 2 now, being given the opportunity to really kind of take the reins of the offense and make it what he wants it to be. Because again, this is somebody who, while I say he has split a lot of time between quarterbacks coaching and running backs coaching, he definitely has favored more on the quarterback side. He has some programs that you can look into that kind of goes over coaching quarterbacks and teaching them how to understand the game. And I want to see how he's really going to run this unit this year, because last year it was very clear and evident, because Kirby Wilson talked about it a lot. They were really going to focus on running the football, and there were times last year where I really felt like the Maulers were just running the football more so because the point was that Kirby Wilson wanted to run it down people's throats. And there were points in the season where it really felt like you knew what was coming. They were running some of the most heavy set formations and obvious running plays I have seen in quite some time. You could sometimes sit there and go, this is going to be a run up the middle, or maybe it's like a power or something like that, because you're looking at it looked like 6 or 7 offensive linemen and then 2 tight ends on the set. So I'm really hoping that John Tomlinson, with a defensive-minded head coach, is really given the reins and kind of fleshes out the offense into what he really wants it to be. And I think we will see some of that there. And this is not to trash anything about Kirby Wilson or anything like that. This is more so just there was a clear directive under Kirby Wilson, and I'm hoping now with a defensive head coach, John Tomlinson just gets more of an opportunity to mold this offense into what he sees fit. And I'm expecting that to be a little bit more of a balanced attack. But you do have a couple of good running backs over there to work with, so we'll have to see how things pan out for them. But I am really excited about the offense this year and some of the changes they are going to make, and I anticipate seeing in terms of their scheme. Now, as for their defensive coordinator and assistant head coach, like I mentioned, Jarren Horton, the son of Ray Horton, he is back for another year as well. He's a young gun in the coaching world. He's only 31 years old, still pretty wet behind the ears. His coaching career dates back to roughly 2015, where he was working with Vanderbilt as a defensive analytics assistant. He actually had a second stint there as an analyst in 2017. He had a little bit of a time spent in the NFL as well. Impressively enough, he was the Browns DB's assistant coach in 2016. He was a summer assistant coach for the Steelers in 2017. He also had a quick stint in 2018 as a a defensive assistant and safeties coach in 2018 for Southeastern Louisiana University. And then he spent 4 years with UConn, working in the secondary predominantly for the first 3 years, and then getting promoted to defensive coordinator and safeties coach in 2022 when they had a head coaching change and things kind of shifted around after the first couple of games of the season. I'll be really excited to see how this defense looks this year, and I'm also a little bit curious as to how it looks, because for Jarren Horton, he has, at least in UConn, he has worked predominantly within a 4-3 system. That's what they've been working over there with the Huskies for the last few years now. And with his dad having so much experience in such a successful and Super Bowl winning 3-4 defense like the Pittsburgh Steelers, does Ray Horton opt to maybe change things up and, teach his son? Because for some people, you might not think swapping defenses is that big of a deal, but it is a giant scheme change. So I'm curious, how well versed in 3-4 is Jarren Horton if they opt to swap over to the 3-4, and how successful does it end up being, having his father kind of show him the ropes and, teach him how to teach these players how to run the 3-4 scheme they decide to do, or do they stick with what Jarren Horton's more familiar with, at least in his coaching days so far, in a 4-3 system? I would personally like to see them kind of flesh out a 3-4 system there, or maybe work even some sort of like a hybrid multiple front type deal where you get some 4-3 packages and you get some 3-4 packages. Because the way I see it, especially last year, and maybe because it was the first year, maybe this is the reason, but it felt like defenses were a little bit ahead of the offenses, at least at the early portion of last year's UFL season. I would like to see them maybe try to deploy something a little bit more confusing. Again, a hybrid multiple front where you get a little bit of the 3-4, a little bit of the 4-3, and kind of keep the offenses that you're going up against guessing as to what you're going to do. Now, this isn't the NFL. We're not dealing with NFL caliber players, but we are dealing with some smart young guys that are eager to learn and do what they have to do to make a name for themselves here. So I'd be very curious to see what they deploy. In my personal opinion, I would like to see some of that 3-4 aspect, but if it's 4-3, wouldn't surprise me either. It all just really boils down to ultimately what they decide on. So I'll be curious to see how that shapes out and what the defense looks like as we start to work our way through training camp and into the early few weeks of the season when their schemes kind of get revealed as they play through games. But that is the quick introduction to the Pittsburgh Maulers coaching staff. My Maulers fans, let me know in the comment section down below, how are you feeling about this coaching change going into year number 2 of the USFL? Are you excited? What are the wrinkles to the game that you expect to see from both the offense and the defense? Your thoughts on my opinion with John Tomlinson now getting a little bit more control over the offense, knowing that his head coach is more of a defensive guy, and I'm sure will probably want to be a little bit more hands-on on the defensive side of the ball. All that and more. Let me know your opinions in the comment section down below. I'd be very interested in hearing what you all think. But that is it for me. I appreciate you if you made it all the way to the end of the video. I'll talk to you all next time. Have a good one.